Thomas Cole National Historic Site. My name is Maura O'Shea. I am the Executive Director here, and it's just a thrill to see everyone this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us for the 2025 Cole Fellows presentations. I'm really looking forward to your discoveries and learning about all of the research you've conducted this last year. And I congratulate each of you on your great success, many accomplishments, and also thank you for the many contributions you've made to our site in this last year. It's been a joy for all of us to work with you, and a personal joy for me to get to know each of you. And I'd like to also extend a warm welcome to the friends and family of our fellows who are here. Welcome and thank you for joining us. This annual full-year residency is now in its 14th year. It's extraordinary. And it provides an important pathway to exceptional emerging scholars in the field to begin their professional careers, while also making impactful contributions to our site through their research and through public engagement, which is just extraordinary. If you have not yet had the pleasure to take a tour with one of our fellows, I urge you to sign up immediately because it will be a memorable treat for you. So we're all looking forward to your exciting futures, your careers, as you join the many alumni of this program who have forged important careers in the arts and humanities. Behind the scenes, this program has been guided and nurtured by our board chair, Warner Shook, whose professional experience and personal passion has really enriched every aspect of the program. Thank you so much, Warner. And on the staff side, Heather Palmer and Cait Gurley work hand in glove to provide a rich and personal experience for each fellow. Thank you both so very much. Now, I'd like to invite Cait Gurley, the Chief Curator and Director of the Fellowship, to introduce our 2025 Fellows.
Thank you, Maura. How many of you guys have been here before for the Fellows Talks? I feel like a lot of you. Yeah, oh my gosh, it's so nice to see so many people here today. And as Maura said, I oversee curatorial affairs, but also the fellowship program, and it's such a joy to work with the fellows every year. So I'm really pleased to introduce Frances Baker Tucker, Elizabeth Vazquez, Cait Gurley. And this past year, they have welcomed hundreds of visitors and students. The fellows have worked with us to realize major exhibitions, publications, educational programs, teacher workshops, but they've also, in addition to that, done deep dives, and they think outside the box and have done a lot of work thinking about our history and our present moment. So it's very exciting. One thing I do have to say about this group of fellows that really stands out, every week I feel like I heard someone saying, oh my God, I had the best tour with Cait. I had the best tour with Elizabeth. Frances gives the best tours. So it was really wonderful. And the fellows, I hope, have learned a lot during their year with us. But they've shared so much and taught us so much about the history of our land, the eldest resident on our site, the honey locust tree, about China painting today and classics, about the people who lived here and the people who continue to come here today, our visitors, who continue to find inspiration in this historic artist home and studio and the landscape here. So it's really quite amazing. And fellows, I would just like to take a moment and thank you, each one of you, for the very unique, incredible contributions you've made to our organization this year. And I also want to thank everybody who's sitting here today in some way, all of you have been such a huge part of our work with the fellows and at the site this year, so thank you for that. And I'd also like to thank Warner Shook, of course. Warner has been working with the fellows on their presentations all year, and it's kind of like VIP theater workshop. I've also heard it called Warner Camp. But it's a gift to us, for the presentations we're about to hear are going to be terrific. But also it's a gift to the fellows, because I know they're going to take and carry this work that they've done here far into their prosperous, wonderful careers that lay ahead. So thank you all for coming. And the presentations are going to be about 45 minutes. We are going to save questions till the end of everybody's presentations. We'll have time for a Q&A. And then let's all go over to the Cole Center and toast some champagne and celebrate this group. And for now, I would like to welcome Cait Gurley.
Hello, everyone. Just one more thanks to get out of the way. On behalf of the fellows, we would like to thank Kate McInerney, Heather Palmer, and Warner Shook for their invaluable insight and guidance throughout this last year. So my name is Cait Gurley, and my project is called The Father of American Art, How Identity Influences Thomas Cole's Course of Empire. Now, I was introduced to Thomas Cole through a paper I wrote for a Roman art history class on his Course of Empire series. The Course of Empire is a series of 5 paintings that show the rise and fall of a civilization, and it's what ultimately brought me to the Cole Fellowship. As a Cole Fellow, I've been building on this paper and conducting new research on the influence of classical architecture on the works of Thomas Cole. Interestingly, I noticed that my life outside of the research started to permeate into it. So I recently became an Irish citizen, an event that made me contemplate what it means to be a citizen of a country. I found myself thinking about Thomas Cole's relationship with his national identity and how specifically his trips to Italy influenced it. Now, I give tours here at the site, and visitors are most surprised to learn that Thomas Cole was actually British. So Thomas Cole was born and raised in the northwest corner of England, in the county of Lancashire, in the industrial town called Bolton-le-Moors. However, because of political instability and violence in Lancashire, Thomas Cole, at the age of 17, immigrated to America with his parents and sister Sarah in 1818. And of course, there's some nuance to this. Identity is fluid. It's something that changes throughout a person's life. And this was no different for Cole. Cole spent the majority of his life in America. And he reportedly told his patron, William Dunlap, that he would have given his left hand to have been born in America. But Thomas Cole's birthplace plays a foundational part in his identity, even if it does change during his lifetime. To a certain degree, Cole would have considered himself British, and there's something that points to this. 15 years before Thomas Cole and his family immigrate, the United States passes the Naturalization Law of 1802. Now, this law made it easier to become an American citizen. An individual only had to reside in the United States for 5 years to qualify for citizenship, where previously they had to reside for 15. So this means that if Thomas Cole arrived in the US in 1818, he became eligible to become a citizen in 1824. However, Thomas Cole doesn't become an American citizen until 1834, almost a decade after he qualifies for citizenship. Now, this is a photo of his certificate of citizenship, which is currently on display at the Albany Institute. So the question becomes, what made Thomas Cole decide to officially become an American citizen? Now, just before Thomas Cole takes American citizenship, he goes abroad to Europe in 1829. A timeline of his trip is shown here, where he starts in London in June 1829, briefly goes north in the fall,
goes back down to London in October. In May 1831, he's in France for a week. But then in the summer of 1831, he's in Florence, where he then goes across Italy to Rome, Tivoli, Naples, where he sees Pompeii and Herculaneum, and then finally returns back to Florence. And this is where he leaves from to go back to America. Cole spends 3.5 years abroad, and he spends the majority of his time in his native England. He spends 23 months there. And this itinerary is not pulled from thin air. It's something known as the Grand Tour, a trip taken by wealthy individuals to gain knowledge of the art and culture of antiquity and the Renaissance. Importantly, the Grand Tour was a common occurrence among the wealthy British upper class, like the ones shown here in Carl Spitzwig's 1845 painting, English Tourists in the Campania. Now, Thomas Cole undoubtedly wanted to be a part of this wealthy British upper class. He was obsessed with being seen as a gentleman. He was never without his top hat. He always had his coattails on. And Cole's choice to complete the Grand Tour furthers this desire to be seen as wealthy and British. Cole starts his Grand Tour in England, and this is where he spends the majority of his time. While in England, he tries to break into the British art world as a British artist, but unfortunately, he's unsuccessful in this. In February 1831, his piece for the British Institution is skied, meaning that it's placed at the tops of these salon walls where viewers couldn't see it. A few months later, the same thing happens at the Royal Academy, even though he was assured that it wouldn't. In addition to this, he's meeting British painters like J.M.W. Turner and is horrified at their demeanor. He finds no similarities with them. At the same time that this is happening, Cole starts spending more time with Americans abroad. American travelers are the ones commissioning him for American scenes. American newspapers are the ones commenting on his work and his activities. And this continues during his time in Florence, Italy. Now, Thomas Cole goes to Italy in 1831 and absolutely falls in love with it, and in particular with the city of Florence. And this is interesting because some pretty pivotal events happen for him here. On June 30th, 1831, only a month into his stay, Cole moves from the British quarter of Florence to what's known as the American quarter. And this sort of physical changing of the sides is compounded by another event in Florence. During Cole's time in the city, he's granted the ability to train at the Accademia di Belle Arti. And this was achieved with the help of James Ambrosi, who was the first United States consul in Florence. And this is peculiar. Now, consulates are designed to help a particular country's citizens while they're abroad. Consulates don't help other countries' citizens. However, the consul for a country of which Cole was not a citizen helped get him into the most esteemed art academy in Italy. Now, why would the American consul Ambrosi go through so much trouble for Cole? Maybe it was because Cole was such a well-known name in America that Ambrosi sort of felt like he had to help him. Maybe Ambrosi wanted to help a sort of famed person, a celebrity figure, and get the notoriety. Maybe a better question is, what was Cole doing in the United States consulate instead of the English consulate? And this is where the naturalization law that I mentioned earlier comes back into play. Now, at this time in American legislation, a person seeking citizenship had to make a declaration of intention 3 years prior to gaining citizenship. So if Cole gets citizenship in 1834, he had to apply for it in 1831, which is when he's in Florence, and their only recorded instance of him coming into contact with a United States official occurs. So in this, we can see how Florence plays a major role in Cole's life. It's the city where a major shift happens in him. And as I mentioned earlier, identity is not a completely absolute thing. And I'm not saying that he stopped talking in a British accent or threw all his tea into the harbor or something, but something internally in him changed. He had already been living in the United States for 10 years and had not taken citizenship, and he could have gone the rest of his life without citizenship. And it's important to understand how his motivation in his work might have played into this. Now, Thomas Cole wanted to be known. Like many artists, he wanted to be famous. And perhaps he saw his prospects more clearly in America rather than England. He saw how enraptured US newspapers were with his work, how many Americans commissioned him for American scenes. Either way, in 1832, when Thomas Cole comes back to New York Harbor, he is an American. His return is announced in 2 New York papers, one of which, from the New York Mirror, says that the artist is now exhibiting at his ruins, for the gratification of his friends, a number of new and delightful pictures by himself. We cannot examine his fine works of genius and successful application without feeling proud that the artist is our countryman. It's at this time that Thomas Cole is commissioned by the wealthy New York merchant Luman Reed for a series of paintings which would become The Course of Empire. Now, The Course of Empire is undeniably a product of Thomas Cole's Americanization. He's now responsible for the survival of the nation to which he belongs. And The Course of Empire is filled with classical references, and it's really a demonstration of Cole's time abroad, both in identity and in skill as an artist. The subject for the series comes from Edward Gibbon's 1776 book, The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. In this book, Gibbon posits that the end of the Roman Empire was caused by 2 things: an internal decline and then an external attack, which is exactly what's happening in Course of Empire, specifically in Consummation of Empire and Destruction. In Consummation, a civilization suffers an internal decline when it changes from a republic to an empire. In Destruction, the empire falls from an external attack. And it's important to remember that Gibbon's book was published in 1776 at the height of the American Revolution. So, as a British writer and a member of Parliament, Gibbon was obviously lamenting what he perceived to be the end of his own British Empire. It's also important to remember that the way that Course of Empire would have been displayed, it wouldn't have looked like this. The way that paintings are displayed on the screen, they appear to be of almost equal value, but in reality, the series would have looked something like this. So this is how it would have been displayed in Luman Reed's New York Gallery. The New York Historical Society, which is where these pieces are currently stored, did an exhibition in 1990 about these pieces, where they decided to display them in their original format. I got this photo from Dr. Alan Wallach because that was 12 years before I was born, so unfortunately I couldn't make it. But as you can see, Consummation of Empire is right in the center of the display, and it's the largest piece. So we can tell that Consummation is the climax of the series based on its size, its placement, and its subject. It shows exactly what Gibbon posits as one cause for the end of the Roman Empire, an internal decline. Here, an emperor is shown about to go underneath a triumphal arch as an act of triumph. What is the triumph for? The defeat of the Republic. Following the emperor are captured senators in their white togas, now prisoners of this new empire. And Thomas Cole solidifies this idea with imperial Roman architecture, specifically that of the Temple of Vespasian in Titus. So Thomas Cole sketched this temple, which you can see to the left, in 1831 while he was in Rome. The middle is a section from Consummation, and on the right shows what it looks like today. And the temple serves as this model for the triumphal arch. And while the complete inscription is known, but physically lost for the most part, the very last word, restaurant, remains, which you can see here on Cole's sketch. And it's particularly interesting that Cole paid close attention to this word on his sketch. Now, restaurant is a Latin word. It means to restore, to revive, to make new again. It's in the third person plural imperfect tense, which basically means that it has a sort of future tense. It's something that is about to come for a large group of people, a nation maybe. It's from this word that we get the English restitution, the act of restoring. And this is contrasted with the final picture in the series, desolation. Here, we see the effects of what happens when things aren't restored. Civilization falls. Nature covers the ruins. Desolation is the state of emptiness, of complete and utter destruction. Desolation is the opposite of restitution. However, it's important to remember that Thomas Cole conceived of the course of empire as a cycle that all civilizations go through. So if he was applying this to America, what stage is the nation at? And usually the answer to this has a very pessimistic tone. People usually say we fall between consummation and destruction. But I posit that Cole was putting a glimmer of hope in this series. Now, the course of empire is undoubtedly a warning, and it undoubtedly shows Cole's anxiety for the future of America. But if Cole truly believed that America was hurtling towards complete and utter desolation, as the series would suggest, why would he have become an American citizen? Instead, in the climax of this series, in consummation, he specifically chose to depict a temple that embodies restoration. And it's through this word that Cole is sending a message to his American viewer. There's still hope. Even as the emperor who's captured the Senate, who's defeated the Republic, processes under the arch, there's still a chance. Things can still be restored. Thank you.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Frances Baker Tucker, and before I begin, I'd like to echo the thanks made at the beginning of our talk, but also specifically thank Beth Wynn and our entire museum education team, many of whom are here today, for their support, because they helped me gather the data that I will be sharing with you today. So, whether you're brand new to the site or a returning visitor, the Cole Site's Whole History Project may be familiar to you. Launched in 2021, this initiative seeks to expand the stories we tell at our site. This poster features silhouettes of the more than 20 people we know to be members of Cedar Grove's historic household. So let's take a moment to break down the name. The meaning of whole history is that we acknowledge that there are holes in the history that we tell at our site. Things that are missing, histories of labor, people of color, and the generations of women whose stories are embedded here. The goal of this project is to present a more full and honest history, a whole history. Thomas Cole is still our bread and butter, but the Cedar Grove household included anywhere from 11 to 14 people during Cole's tenure here. The purpose of this initiative is to tell their stories. And since 2021, that research has uncovered a wealth of knowledge, which over the years has been incorporated into our site's interpretation. You may recognize these displays as products of the Whole History Initiative. This reproduction of the 1840 Greene County Census gives visitors a peek into the research process that alerted us to the existence of the free black woman, who was a laborer who lived and worked in Thomas Cole's household, and whose bedroom is interpreted on our ground floor. Past fellows Adeze Diko and Beth Wynn pioneered that research. Yellow cards, scattered throughout the house, ask visitors to consider laborers' work that was necessary to keep this household running. So since these displays have been installed for the past few seasons, my project this year was to determine whether and how these displays have been effective, inviting educational tools. So first, I evaluated the efficacy of whole history displays at communicating these myriad stories. And second, I proposed new ways to interpret these stories to build on our existing interpretation. So let's begin with my evaluation process. Museum evaluation seeks to gain information about the visitor's experience, and this is where you all come in. To determine how effective these displays have been, I wanted your perspective, the museum goers. My goal was to create an engaging, evaluative activity that you all would want to participate in, and that would answer my question. Who in our historic household are visitors learning about? And who do they still have questions about? So if you recognize this, I want to thank you for your participation, because today we will be diving into your answers. My first strategy was to design this feedback station in our storehouse building. Using that whole history poster, I asked visitors to use 2 different colored push pins to identify first which individuals they did learn about during their visit, and second, which individuals they left questions with, who they wanted to know more about. As more pins were added, it created a visual map tracking visitors' learning. Additionally, I included supplies for visitors to leave extended written feedback related to the whole history project. My second strategy was to directly observe visitors interacting with the various whole history displays. I spent about 15 hours in the main house closely watching how visitors utilize these resources, ranking their engagement from simply noticing something to actually reading the content, like this yellow card here that asks who prepared refreshments and carried them into the room, to maybe going so far as to take out their phone and scan a QR code for more information. So this evaluation took place between September and December of 2024. During that time, I received 352 pinboard responses, which accounts for about 11% of visitors during that period. 43 people left written feedback, which accounts for about 1% of our visitors during that time. And I observed 76 visitors in the house over the course of 15 hours, which is about 2% of our visitors during this period. And now, it's my job to tell you what I think the results mean for us. Today, I'm going to share 2 of my major takeaways with you, and one idea for how we could implement it going forward. What did you, the visitors, tell us, and what can we learn from it? So first, evidence suggests that visitors, you all, are curious about labor history. From those pinboard responses, the top 3 individuals visitors reported wanting to learn more about were as follows. In third place, we have Caesar, Chloe, and Egbert. Now, Caesar and Chloe were individuals enslaved by the Thompson family. That's the family who were the original builders and owners of Cedar Grove, and they lived at the site before Thomas Cole arrived here. Egbert was a free laborer whose time here coincided with Thomas. In second place, we have the free white girl, a free laborer who also lived and worked here during Thomas's time. We learned of her existence through the 1840 Greene County Census. And in first place, we have Emily Cole, who is the daughter of Thomas and Mariah and an accomplished porcelain artist whose work we will be celebrating in next month's exhibition, and the free black woman, who I mentioned previously. Save Emily Cole, these are all laborers whose lives are in memory here and who visitors reported wanting to learn more about. This came through in written feedback too. Visitors expressed that it would be nice if there were more resources linked to the stories of enslaved people in the Hudson Valley at this time, and that they would like to hear more about free servants. Additionally, as the fellow responsible for leading our special topic tour entitled Black Labor and Legacy, which focuses on the labor history of our site, I've had many conversations with visitors who are curious about how to better understand the experience of an enslaved laborer versus a freed servant. And finally, through observation, I saw that the 1840 census display, pictured here on the left, was the third most visited whole history display in the House. The most visited, the table in the sitting room here on the right, which features newspaper articles, includes interpretation regarding the free black woman, imagining whether she was involved in abolition movements or how she felt living under the Fugitive Slave Act. So, how do we answer this call for more information about laborers? If you've been to the main house and visited the bedroom of the free black woman, or even attended a Black Labor and Legacy tour, you know that this is where the holes in our history become apparent. We used sparse historical documents, like the census, to parse together the life of someone like the free black woman. We are still in search of her name. Why isn't it recorded? As the fellow who leads these tours, this is something we talk about openly. I posed that question to my tour group. Why do you think we don't know the free black woman's name? This almost always sparks rich discussion. I've had groups ask about the research process, what archives we look at, whether we use enslaved persons' narratives, like Sojourner Truth, to build context on what the free black woman's life could have looked like. What we come to in these conversations is that there is a reason there are holes in our history. And that's because of the purposeful erasure of people's lives and experiences that were considered less than. I found that this close looking at what we don't know and why we don't know it proves generative ground for discussion. It's because of these open discussions that I think visitors answered my original question this way. Who do you want to know more about? Of course they want to know more about the laborers, because we talk candidly about how the research trail sometimes runs cold, and they leave our site understanding why these questions remain. But from an interpretive perspective, the challenge becomes, what can you provide a visitor who wants to know more about someone, who we simply don't know more about? We'll return to that question in a minute. But what I do know is that this insight into visitors' perspectives often comes from one-on-one discussions I have with them. The conversations are reciprocal. They learn from me, but I almost always learn more from them. Which brings me to my second major takeaway. My evaluation indicated that interactions with museum educators are a vital part of a positive visitor experience. This word cloud in the center here was compiled using all the terms visitors mentioned in their written responses to us. The larger the word is within the cloud, the more frequently it was mentioned. And I want you to notice that staff and knowledgeable are two of the largest words. Overwhelmingly, visitors took the time to write down comments specifically about experiences with staff, and I have a few examples here. On the left, wonderful tour by Cait. One of the best I've done anywhere. Very knowledgeable, friendly, good listener, and left time for questions. And on the right, beautiful. Good to have knowledgeable docents to answer questions. Thanks. Note, too, that all of my co-fellows are mentioned by name in this word cloud, because personal connections they made with visitors stuck. This tells me that, while we want to offer a wide array of facilitated and unfacilitated interpretive activities for our visitors, investing in museum education staff is absolutely worthwhile because it overwhelmingly has the greatest positive impact on our visitors. So let's review what we've learned from everyone. We know that visitors are curious about labor history, particularly about why we don't know what we don't know. We know that conversations with museum educators are essential to a successful visitor experience. So what can we change in our interpretation to better meet these needs? One possibility lies in the idea of the reflection space. The goal of a museum reflection space is to create a neutral, welcoming environment where visitors can process their experience. This is especially prevalent as museums increasingly present exhibitions that grapple with difficult histories, like we're trying to do with our enslavement history. During our visits to other institutions this year, I saw many examples of these spaces. Some included written response stations, either asking for direct feedback related to the exhibition or asking for visitors' personal reflections and memories related to the exhibition's content. Creatively, some incorporate multi-sensory components, like this space on the left that offered a record player where you could listen to the artist's favorite music as you reflect. My co-fellow Elizabeth mentioned in a recent meeting that as the Cole site plans exhibitions that will bring in art that grapples with things like slavery history, it is important for us to consider providing a reflection space to support our visitors. Inspired by her, I think this is a promising solution to the question I posed earlier. What can you provide to a visitor who wants to know more about someone's history when we simply don't know more? I propose installing a permanent whole history reflection space at the site, a space that explicitly acknowledges the holes in our history and the damage that erasure has caused, and invites visitors to safely reflect on what that means for us in the present day. The purpose of our reflection space would be to provide neutral ground for our visitors to grapple with what we don't know and why we don't know it. The storehouse, now freed up as an education space, provides a solid foundation for this. In a future reflection space, I envision an accessible room with soft, comfortable seating, outlets available to charge your phone, and tables and chairs of varying heights to accommodate youth visitors and different mobility levels. Because this research wouldn't have been possible without the visitors' feedback, I imagine a space where you are always welcome to share your thoughts with us. How are you affected by what's missing in our history? How does it make you feel, and what does it make you wonder? Are there holes in your personal history? Are you looking for your own answers? I hope that this space would invite you to sit with the questions that we have about the past and to learn from that uncertainty. So thank you to everyone who participated in my feedback station and who shared their thoughts with us. Your feedback is essential to making our site better, and without it, this project wouldn't have been possible. I encourage you all to not skip past the next feedback survey that ends up in your email. They may seem tedious and time-consuming, but in many cases, there are people on the other side, listening and ready to learn from you, like me. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Elizabeth Vazquez, and I'm going to be closing out the Fellows' final presentation. Before I begin talking about my research, I would like to acknowledge that this is not a project I could have done by myself. I was very lucky to have a network of Native and non-Native scholars behind me, so Frances Catherine, Dr. Rose Mirren, Professor Douglas Keel, and Lucy Greeno have been indispensable in my research. I also couldn't have done this without the work of knowledge holders Justin Wexler and Misty Cook, who have made so much ecological knowledge available and accessible to the public. Lastly, I could not have done this without my fellow fellows, and I'm just echoing what has been said before. I don't think there's been a group of fellows as close as us, so thank you guys. With their support, I want to present to you my research, Recentering Land. As you crossed the site to get here to our new studio today, you were knowingly, or unknowingly, crossing hundreds of years of history. People have continuously been living on and caring for this land for generations. This was once referred to as Cedar Grove, a working farm teeming with life under ownership of the Thompson family. So this was a 110 square acre parcel, reaching all the way down to the Hudson River. There would not have been these private residences here. It would have been covered entirely with orchards to support a cider business, so peaches, pears, cherries, and apples. Thomas Cole, the namesake of my fellowship, never owned this property or this home, in spite of his connection to this land. The stories here actually go far beyond Thomas Cole or the Thompsons. Honestly, I'm not going to talk about Thomas Cole very much today, just warning you. My favorite stories aren't even about people. They're about the land. So this is our 208-year-old honey locust tree, planted in 1817, just 2 years after the main house was built. This tree has outlived not only the orchards that once covered this place, but all of the site's inhabitants as well. The last Cole who lived here, Edith Cole Silverstein, passed in 2016. I consider the honey locust to be a witness tree, which is a living symbol of time passing, meaning that the tree has seen historic events. This painting, done by Charles Herbert Moore, was created over 20 years after Cole passed, showcasing the tree at about 50 years old. Outside of Thomas Cole's history, this tree has stood through the Civil War, both World Wars, historic blizzards and storms, births and deaths. People have cared for this tree in its entire life, as well as the gardens beneath it. Thomas Cole's sister-in-law, Harriet, actually was in charge of these gardens. In the same vein, this tree has cared for many living beings around the site, underscoring a theme of reciprocity that I want you guys to keep in mind as I talk about ecology today. After the presentation and after our champagne toast, I invite you guys to go stand before the honey locust, just to take in its magic and its size. Maybe you'll see the resident fox or the bumblebee queen. It's very special. So my original task as a fellow was to create a timeline of the site's history, going as far back as information was available. I come from an Indigenous studies and an American history background, so I immediately narrowed in on our biggest knowledge gap, the pre-colonial period. We know a Dutchman purchased this land from the Esopus group of the Munsee Lenape people in 1684, thanks to the research of past fellow Vicente Cayota. Vicente primarily focused on land ownership using colonial archives, so maps and land deeds. I wanted my project to think about what people were doing on this land, how people were living here, the ways that they moved through these arbitrary written boundaries. Knowing the nature of historical research, I decided to choose 3 very simple questions to answer. Who lived here? What did they grow here? And how did they steward this land? How did they have a relationship with this place? If we're going to start with our first question, we need to figure out whose land we're standing on. For the sake of this project, I'm considering the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Lenape, and the Mohican Nation. Also known as the Iroquois, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy includes 6 nations in total: the Oneida, Seneca, Mohawk, Cayuga, Onondaga, and the Tuscarora. I make a point to mention the Haudenosaunee because of their homelands residing in the Catskill Mountains, just to the west of us. You can see it in this map here on the left. Over 2 million square acres of their land now makes up New York State, coming from the Hardenberg Land Patent, or the Great Purchase. In this presentation, I will primarily focus on the Mohican Nation, whose unceded homelands we are currently gathering on. These original stewards were often referred to in colonial archives as the River Indians because of their command of the Hudson River, or the Mexicanatuck in Algonquin. Because of this relationship, they refer to themselves as the Mexicanuck, or the people of the waters that are never still. When we put these maps together, you can see the ways that these traditional territories overlap and jut up against each other. And it's important to think of these borders as porous, as these people weren't, they didn't stay in one place, they were very mobile. We know with the Mohicans especially that during the winter they often traveled to different hunting grounds or maple sugar camps. They would go as far as the Green Mountains in Vermont to hunt moose. So keep that in mind. Additionally, these boundaries were constantly shifting as these people interacted with their neighbors, both positively and negatively, either local to North America or foreign, coming from Europe. War and colonial expulsion meant a constant change of who lived where within these boundaries and within this land. especially in the 120 years leading up to the establishment of Cedar Grove. After being pushed from their traditional homelands, the Mohicans and the Munsee came together in what is now northern Wisconsin to form the Stockbridge-Munsee community, or the SMC for short. We're going to be talking about them quite a bit today. So now that we know who we're talking about, we can talk about what they were growing here. I have corn, beans, and squash, often referred to as the Three Sisters, and their fourth sister, sunflower. For reference, the Three Sisters is an indigenous style of planting, where the three crops are planted together to support one another. So corn is planted first to act as a trellis, then beans come next to fertilize the soil. Lastly, squash comes to protect the sisters from pests and other plants. Planters today are really pushing for sunflower to be included in this sisterhood just because of the way that it distracts squirrels and birds from the other sisters. I personally agree. Before the Mohicans lived in the Hudson Valley and planted corn, they migrated from the west, bringing with them domesticated sunflowers and squash. The way that corn spread across North America, coming from what is now Mexico, means that the Three Sisters configuration came later for the Mohicans. So with these pictures here, I do want to point out the specific kinds of plants that I have for very specific reasons. So this is Lenape blue corn, Stockbridge beans, Boston marrow squash, and Hopi black dye sunflowers. Firstly, these specific crops are still being grown today by the Stockbridge-Munsee on their reservation in Bowler, Wisconsin. They've been protected in a process called seed saving, which means that these seeds have, like their stewards, faced incredible tragedy and traveled across the country to their homes now in Wisconsin. Institutions like Bard Farm are intrinsic to this idea of rematriation, or returning these seeds to their people and to the land that they historically grew in. Additionally, we are very lucky to have writings from a Mohican historian named Hendrik Appamut. Unfortunately, there are no pictures surviving today of Hendrik Appamut, but I do want you all to remember him as a person, not just a name that I'm telling you today. I have here a sketch of a Mohican soldier from the Revolutionary War in the Stockbridge militia, which Appamut served in. He was born in 1757 in the intertribal community of Stockbridge, Massachusetts, and he fought for the United States. He actually corresponded quite frequently with George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, but that's a story for a different time. After his career as a soldier, he primarily served as a diplomat for the United States and as a historian. So in 1790, Appamut writes his history of his people, the history of the Mexicanuk Indians, which unfortunately today only exists in fragments. But the fragments that we have are really important. So I'm going to read this excerpt aloud to you all. The face of this country is in many ways, in many places mountainous, supplied with excellent rivers. The side of these rivers was only known by natives capable of producing skamanan, or Indian corn, and tapakuan, or beans, and ananunek othkutkan, or Indian squashes. So there are two things that I really want to point out to you guys that are interesting about this quote. Firstly, Appamut uses his native Algonquin alongside English, and these words are powerful and important today. They're pivotal for revitalization efforts and bringing this language back. Here at the site, we want to make words like this more normalized and more apparent, and want to bring them into our garden with our next growing season. Additionally, I want to point out that Appamut makes a point of talking about the sides of these rivers as the only known place capable of producing these plants. So, even beyond just the sides of these rivers, there were also islands all across the Hudson River that made for perfect garden spaces. These were full of loam and sand, not rocky soil like this bluff that we stand on. Additionally, you wouldn't have had to worry about watering because the tides and the floodplains of the Hudson would handle it all for you. Scholars often refer to land deeds for the nearby towns of Athens and Coxsackie. Do we have anyone from Athens and Coxsackie here today? All right. So these places were often referred to in the historical archive as being cleared for Mohican fields. Unfortunately, many of these islands that were once beautiful teeming gardens no longer exist, from dredging of the Hudson River to create canals. However, that doesn't mean that we can't remember that they were there. Appalachia goes beyond just talking about gardens to talk about other methods of interacting with this place, such as brush burning. So, despite recent forest fires, such as what I have pictured here from Ulster County, this is 2022, I believe, the Hudson Valley is not a place that historically burns without human intervention. Appalachia describes in his history that it was way easier to burn out a forest than to take an axe to the trees and chop each individual one down. This is considered a form of silviculture, which is a method of woods management to make sure that the woods will be able to survive for way longer. According to Justin Wexler, there's also a really cool legacy that we can still see today from these brush burnings. So white oaks are resistant to fire and often proliferate in places that Mohicans were doing brush burnings. Animals like turkeys, deer, bears, and pheasants were often drawn to the excess of acorns produced by these trees that could spread and fill in the gaps after these burnings. These made for amazing hunting grounds for the Mohican people. This all returns to that theme of reciprocity that I began with. The trees are taking care of the people, and not even just the people, but the game that these people survive on. The people, in turn, protect the oak trees. Dense groves of oak found in this area often have parentage going as far back as these burnings, and I want you to take this with you when you explore the Catskills. Maybe you're from around here, maybe you're just passing through, but remember that. Keeping with oak trees, I do want to return to my original task of creating a timeline for this site and making sure that this information stays accessible. I believe that a tree ring timeline could do wonders for the site. In the middle here, we have an estimated 200-year-old oak tree that once stood before our storehouse, and I have two examples of what this could look like. On the left, I have a tree ring timeline from the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, and then on the right here, the iconic sequoia from the Natural History Museum. There's a reason that I specifically want a tree ring timeline to reintroduce this idea of cycles, going beyond a timeline that, only exists after its beginning and before its end. Like the honey locust, I really wonder what this oak tree saw during its lifetime. But unlike our honey locust, who knows how this oak found its way here? It no longer grows. Despite that, its story remains here and presents an opportunity for us to connect to this place. I look forward with the remaining time of my fellowship to continue making these connections and find old ones as well. In the meantime, I want to leave you with two questions. When we take the time to be present with the land, what can it tell us? And are we ready for what it has to say? Thank you all so much.
Okay, wow, I'm so inspired. I have like all these amazing ideas. What do you all want to come up and we can just do a Q&A if anyone has questions? We can put you on the spot a little bit.
Of course.
Do you want to just come up or
We can step over.
you want to step over?
Yeah,
Okay,
just
I'm
not
gonna.
mess with it.
Okay. Anyone have some questions? Hudson, yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you all so much. I'm a board member here, as you know, and I just want to say I'm so grateful for the contributions all three of you are making to our cause here. It's really important work, and I'm sure we'll be using it all, and just really very proud of you and happy for what you all have created for us. I guess my question, I do have one, is if you all could, if the three of you could just tell a little bit about yourselves and your backstories, somewhat about how you came to focus in on the subject matter that you did. In so many words, I know it's a big subject.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we just go down the line? We'll get down the line.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for your question, Hudson. So let's see, before coming to the Cole Fellowship, I graduated from Smith College in May of 2023. I studied English and Spanish, so I didn't really have an art history background. But I wanted to try out museums, so I did an internship before this at the Dallas Museum of Art as an interpretation intern. And I said that word a lot, and maybe I didn't explain it fully, because some folks don't, it's not as popular maybe in museum field, but it's my chosen specialty is to go into interpretation, which is basically the people who edit the labels that go on a wall and make interpretive activities to help interpret the subject matter to the public, right? Make it accessible for them. So I really found that love at the Dallas Museum and was really excited that the Cole Fellowship allows you to really dive into your specialty and take your topic and make it your own. So I really wanted to spearhead my own interpretive project this year, and I'm very happy with the results. So.
All right, so I graduated from Northwestern University last June, and I majored in history and anthropology, specifically archaeology. And the reason that I came here, people often ask me on tours, oh, you must be into art history. And the answer actually is not really. I came to the Cole Fellowship because I was enamored by the fact that people have been living in this house since it was built, and there are so many stories here. I think my draw to history really is storytelling, but I love that museums and historic houses sort of take you there with these physical objects and being in that place. With my specific project being on land stewardship, I come from a very long line of land stewards, and I was just blessed to have an amazing Indigenous Studies professor at Northwestern, and this has really become my calling.
That's great.
Yeah, so as you can tell, we all have very different backgrounds, but my background is I graduated from Fordham University in May 2024, so just about a year ago, and my studies were in classics and art history, so that's sort of the lens that I was looking at, and I was really excited to get a project where I was looking at Thomas Cole's time abroad, specifically in Italy. I didn't have the chance to bring this up in my presentation, but I've been transcribing about 14,000 words from his trips abroad, of his journals and his essays. So I'm really interested in this sort of art history. Whenever I interviewed for the fellowship, Amanda brought me into the house, and I just sort of fell in love with the, hand-painted borders at the tops of the walls. So I really love looking at things through an art history lens and just, a very interdisciplinary lens. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just curious as to what your plans, all of your plans, your future plans are.
Just stay over there. Stay in the light where we can see you.
Yes, so as to our future plans, today is actually my last day of work. I'm leaving this week to move to Missouri, to Kansas City. I will be working at the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art as an interpretation associate. So, time to thank
Yes, this is very similar to the questions my dad asks me after graduation. I'm very fortunate to be living in a time where programs like this exist. I plan to go to graduate school, but because I would be the first in my family to go to graduate school, I want to make sure I'm committed to the program that I choose, so I want to get as much experience in this field as possible. So in a perfect world, I will be doing this show, probably still in the Northeast, and keeping connections with my TCNHS people.
Yeah, also a very nerve-wracking question that I get asked a lot. I am looking into doing academia, so again, sort of like Liz, in the form of graduate school. And just to echo her again, too, This program has given me a lot of great relationships that I can talk to scholars at different points in their career, find out what they're doing, what brought them to it, which is something I'm really interested in as someone who's looking to pursue that career. So, yeah.
Can I say something? I just want to congratulate you on your presentations, all three of you. And I think the poise and the intelligence and the chutzpah that you showed, I'm so proud of you. And I can just tell you that getting to know these three women over the course of the year has been one of the highlights of my time. And a fourth one right there. They really are extraordinary women. And I would like to co-opt a few of them for the theater, but I'm afraid they're going to go into the art business. But anyway, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. They're not actors, but look what they did up here. You don't see them like click, 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 click. They shared from themselves to you. They gave themselves to you. And that's the greatest gift you can give an audience. So bless you.
So I just want to invite everyone to come over to the Pool Center and we can continue talking and have some champagne and chocolates. And also, before you go, invite everybody on May 3rd. We are going to be opening a new exhibition across the site, Emily Cole, Ceramics, Flora, and Contemporary Responses, May 3rd, 4 to 6. Please come and celebrate that opening. But thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for your extraordinary work. Let's continue the conversation over at the Pool Center.